All right. El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors meeting Tuesday, October 14th, 2025 is now called to order. Take two. So, roll call, please.
Directors Penn, Mansfield, Dwyer, Anzini, and Day present. General Manager Van Dier, General Counsel Polson, and Board Clerk Sullivan present.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in the pledge. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any board comments on the agenda? Any public comments on the agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board on the adoption of today's agenda, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to address the board on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Ravani, do we have any employee recognition?
Yes, we do. The district received an email expressing appreciation for the time and hospitality provided by Andrew Shaw, Senior Civil Engineer, and Ben Rue, Grants Analyst, during the recent tour of the Sly Park Intertie Improvement Project. Staff from the Department of Water Resources shared their gratitude for the informative and engaging tour, stating that it was valuable to visit the site and gain a deeper understanding of the project. They acknowledged the impressive level of coordination and thoughtfulness demonstrated in navigating the project's many components and logistical challenges, and noted that the ingenuity and commitment shown by the team were clearly evident throughout the tour. DWR staff was especially pleased to see that progress remains on track despite the project's complexity. We greatly appreciate Andrew and Ben for their collaboration and commitment to strengthening our partnership with the Department of Water Resources. Thank you.
Thank you, and add board thanks to them for being good, I guess, guides for our project. Didn't make them hike the whole length of the intertie, did you? Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment for items that are not on the agenda?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Lane. I reside in El Dorado Hills, and I appreciate the opportunity to take a few moments to
I'm sorry, hold on for 1 second. It looks like we have a camera that's not working. So what I think I'm going to do, instead of stopping you, I'm just going to keep the camera on the board. And if you don't mind terribly repeating your name one more time.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to take a few minutes to address it.
It's, look.
There we go. All kinds of technical problems today.
Let's start all over again.
So how many good mornings do you need? Okay, again, thanks for the opportunity to be before you today. My purpose is to ensure action is taken on a concern that was raised by Vice President Anzini at the previous board meeting. The concern Director Anzini raised was related to the recent public major audit 4 or 5 months ago and an ongoing problem that was reported by the civil grand jury. Director Anzini stated, and I quote, "Our ratepayers don't understand the implications of what the grand jury report results were." You suggested then that the board, if they agree, maybe talk to the general manager and ask her to come up with a letter signed by the board to the public to understand a few things that were resolved and just to give some overall transparency to the public. President Dwyer, you then remarked, "I think it's really important that we're totally transparent, so we'll take that under advisement and figure out what we can come up with." I think it was then General Counsel Paulson that said, "I believe what you're requesting is the board agendize an item at a future board meeting to discuss this more fully so that each of the board members can weigh in and provide their perspective." And that probably showed up in the meeting minutes, which I haven't had the opportunity to look at again. President Dwyer, you then also offered the remark, you reiterated that EID received an overall clean audit the last time that you all met, and there were some accounting changes with nothing that affected the bottom line, some numbers in one column maybe that should have been another, that kind of thing. And the civil grand jury was clear that they found no malfeasance. So I just want to point out, it's important to note that in an annual report, the auditor really issues two reports. One is the audit of the financial statements. That's the one that people generally see as, quotes, the audit, and the one to which the comments were directed about the clean audit. But at the back of the annual comprehensive financial report is a report on the internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, because in 2023, the auditors issued an unmodified clean opinion, right? A clean audit on the financial statement of 2023. But there are also multiple significant deficiencies that were revealed in the auditor's internal memo that was issued to the board. And some of those were noted in the grand jury report, as the grand jury did have access to that internal memo. The 2024 auditor, your new auditor this year, looked into the prior year and cited material weakness in the previous year's financial statements. The result was a complete restatement of the 2023 financial statements, as well as other significant deficiencies that were found in this year's statement. The reason why I bring that up is a material weakness. The highest level of seriousness is the most serious type of control deficiency and requires immediate attention from the management and those responsible for governance. So the action I'm requesting, and this is really based on the discussion that you had here, is one, the board agendize an item for a future meeting to discuss these concerns more fully so that each of the board members can weigh in and provide their perspective. And that's, I believe, what General Counsel Paulson noted. Hopefully that shows up in the minutes. The second item is that the board decide if Vice President Anzini's idea of sending a letter from the general manager signed by the board to inform the public about resolved issues and help increase transparency actually gets done. So I'll be looking forward to hearing what that decision is. And I just end by saying, given the heightened concerns over rate increases, I know you've been hearing a lot about that. We've been living a lot of that. Specifically addressed if and how rate calculations may have been impacted given the restatement of the 2023 financial report, right? Significant restatement. The Prop 218 preparation actually occurred in 2023. The last quarter of that year is when the meetings and the approvals culminated for the rate increases, the maximum rate increases. And I just add that although the bottom line numbers add up, which is absolutely critical, those columns are also important too. For example, in the original 2023 audit, $46.8 million was shown as moving on paper from wastewater to water in that annual comprehensive financial report. And you think about it, we calculate the rates separately. You have a 12% or so increase in water, 3% in wastewater, and the fact that that money is moving back and forth when you're calculating rates might draw some questions. So I just invite the board to follow through on those two action items, and hopefully they will show up in the notes, the meeting notes, when I see them published, and look forward to any tentatively, this being part of a scheduled item at a future meeting.
Do you mind terribly restating your name for the record?
Say again, please?
Restate your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Mike Lane, and I live in El Dorado Hills. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe we will add that as an agenda item in the future.
It is part of the minutes from the last meeting that was in the board packet, and her under review of assignments. So yes, it was noted and included in the minutes of this last board packet that will be approved. No, it's going to, it would be an action item because she's asking for a letter to be signed.
Yeah, staff's currently working on the ask and figuring out how we bring it forward to the board for consideration. So we're actively working on that as we are actively working on everything related to the audits. There is day-by-day progress as we try to address things that were identified. But it's also a long-term change. So it's the day-by-day changes that we need to make, but then also the long-term to get us to where we need to get to. And our goal is to share that as much as we can with the board and the public for awareness as we move forward.
I'll just add that the board was aware of the issues in both the previous audit and this audit. We took action, not as quickly as we would have liked, made significant changes in staffing in the finance department, and I believe as we move forward, we'll be doing a lot better. Director Anzini.
I appreciate you bringing that forward. Yes, staff is working on that, and it will be fairly soon, but you identified the certain things that we as board members saw, but it was unveiling in front of us. In order to respond to you appropriately, it is important that we have partially a new board, and we also have new management. This is a cautious way of us moving forward, but again, the transparency part of it is most important, and we hope to adjust that. You mentioned about the Prop 18 movement. We had concerns then with the cost of services study, people coming forward and mentioning these items. It's good to refresh our memories on that because we've had significant changes in our organization since 2023. And I look positively at this, but I also look positively at the transparency that we are going to provide to the ratepayers. So thank you.
Any other board comments on this, on the public comment?
Just a reminder, President Dwyer, this was not an agendized item.
Yeah.
So the board, as is permitted under the Brown Act, to briefly respond to public comments made on items not on the agenda. But remember that the public does not have the benefit of knowing in advance that you would be discussing this topic. So please bear that in mind.
Thank you for the clarification.
My advice just to management would be to consult with Director Anzini and our president when preparing this action item. I think it would help.
Okay, any other public comments for items not on the agenda?
If additional members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer does not appear. Are there any additional members of the public wishing to speak?
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to communications, General Manager. Nothing. That's okay. Jennifer, do you have anything as clerk of the board?
Nothing today, thank you.
Okay, well, not being at a loss for words, I've got a couple. One, I'd like to say hats off to the staff for the 100-year celebration. It was a great event. Thank you, Director Anzini and Penn, for attending. I think it gave us an opportunity to showcase the complexity and actually, from my view, the dedication of the people that were there staffing the various displays. It was just excellent. So thank you, hats off to everybody. The other thing I have is I did attend the water agency meeting last week, and the discussion was about ag water, and we'll continue to focus on that. That's all I had. Any other board member comments? No. Director Penn.
Just, again, kudos to staff and on the centennial celebration. It really is, I'm always amazed at as President Dwyer talked about, the complexity and the dedication of staff. It was just really outstanding. And I sat in remotely on the water agency meeting, and there are a lot of things going on in the county, and I look forward to us staving off the challenges and improving on the things that work well.
Thank you. Yes, Director Anzini.
Yes, apparently, I should report, but I did not, I only attended virtually, but it was the Mountain County Water Agency, Regional Agency Board meeting. They had it at Hellhole Reservoir, and I was not going to go to that one. But I was able to do it virtually. And there's a lot of significant things the agency's doing in recruiting other urban water agencies to be a part of the decisions. We have a really good legislative person also working with the Mountain County Water, and the reporting from Justin Camprusco is awesome. I would love to extend the invite to our general manager to try to get to the next forum that we're going to be having. But there's an amazing amount of rural water agencies that go to these events. Most important is our connection, sharing the American River along with the Placer County Water Agency. So it's significant. And I know the El Dorado Water Agency also attended. They ended up going down into hellhole with the rest of the people. And it was an overnight thing, so I could not do it. Anyway, that's my report. And stay tuned for invites to a rural connection for a conference that's coming up.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay. Moving along to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Before we make a motion, I'd like to pull item number 2 for separate consideration. I'll also be recusing from that item.
Okay, thank you. We'll pull number 2. Any other?
Move consent,
-2.
-2.
Yeah, and I'll second that.
Thank you. Any board comment? Any public comment on the consent calendar minus item 2?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the approval of today's consent calendar with item number 2 pulled, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Day. I believe that we're ready for the vote for items 1 and 3 on today's consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. Please vote. Okay, now let's.
No, I'm sorry. Divisions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now, shall we consider item 2 off the consent calendar?
I'll move approval. Oh, okay.
I have to give my reasons for recusal. As an employee of Goldbud Farms, our company receives income from providing farm management services to Matt Veerkamp Vineyards. That's an agricultural enterprise owned by Matt Veerkamp. It's separate and distinct from Doug Veerkamp General Engineering Company. But being that Matt is both an officer and a partial owner of Veerkamp General Engineering, I think it's most appropriate that I just recuse myself from deliberations and voting on items that that affect Doug Veerkamp Incorporated.
General Counsel, did you give your thoughts on that?
Director Mansfield has collaborated with me in advance of today's meeting, and I provided him with my analysis. So I think his decision to recuse is consistent with my advice.
Okay, good. Any other board discussion on this?
We have,
item?
the item 2 was moved by Director Anzini, however, we do not have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Director Day. Now, are there any other board comments on this item? Any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer does not appear. Any members of the public are wishing to speak on consent calendar item number 2, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
And just a comment here, again, in the order of transparency, I know the public sees the agenda, but in addition to the agenda, there's a link to all the board materials. And the warrant register is part of that link, part of the board material. And those are all the checks that we write and approve for all of the expenditures, big and small. So I would encourage the public to review the warrant register as well. And if there's any anomalies or if anybody has a comment, it's there for their viewing and available to them. Okay, thank you. So we'll move to a public hearing on resolution for board policies. Let's,
We'll open the public hearing at 9:25 a.m.
thank you.
Good morning, President Dwyer and members of the board. My name is Penny Beckman. I am the Finance Director for the district. I will be presenting the proposed amendments for board policies 3090, 3095, 3096, our investment policies, which follow the Government Finance Officers Association and the California Municipal Treasurers Association best practices. Previous board actions were taken on September 11th, 2006, when the board adopted the proposed Board Policy 3000 for district business operations. That series includes investments 3090 and delegation of investments function 3095 and investment policy certification 3096. Today, we are asking the board to consolidate the investment policies to one by consolidating 3095 and 3096 into 3090. A red line version of the policy is included in attachment B of the agenda item. It addresses information, language, and updates recommended by staff that includes replacing the references to the deleted treasurer position with the finance director, updates the authorized investments and conditions to provide additional flexibility in the pooled investment types. That includes allowing the maximum of $75 million into the local agency investment fund known as LAIF, and up to 75% of the district's portfolio in the California Management Program known as CAMP. Our current policy limits these two pooled investment opportunities to 75% of the overall district portfolio. Interest rates are currently better in the pooled investments than other types of investments, and they don't require any maturity. As the market changes, we will take advantage of other investment types that will be included in the policy. Also, per California Government Code, staff will be updating the reporting to the board monthly instead of quarterly, starting in January. And then finally, the current policy requires that the district investment policy be recertified every 3 years through the Association of Public Treasurers of the United States and Canada. We are recommending that we utilize the California Municipal Treasurers Association's program that is more aligned with California laws and regulations. And then as part of these updates, we'd also like to recommend that the board adopt 2 resolutions. One that appoints the finance director as the treasurer and approves the updated surety bond that is required to be held by the treasurer. And then the second will be adopted annually that delegates investment authority to the treasurer, grants the authority to the general manager in the absence of the finance director, and allows delegated administrators. Staff is recommending option 1, adopt the proposed resolutions and amendments to board policies 3090, 3095, and 3096 to update the investment policies. And that's all that I have. Thank you for your time, and I am available if you have any questions.
I'll move option 1 with a comment that it's nice to see us going through systematically a lot of our records and documents and stuff. So thank you for doing that, and I know you're going to continue to do it.
Director Anzini? Yeah, I appreciate the fact that we're updating since 2006.
Can we have a second before we have discussion?
Oh, okay. I will second it. Now can we discuss?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for keeping us moving, Board Secretary. Yeah, I believe that this is an upgrade that is necessary, and it actually shows that we are monitoring as much as we can in a more modern, and using the California, I guess you would call it template, to manage our funding is the best idea. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
We've talked a lot about transparency today. We're amending some board policies today. Pravani and I had a separate meeting that involved administrative regulations, which sit under board policies. And I think at an appropriate time, it might be a useful informational item for the public to understand how those administrative regulations are developed, and maybe give the board an opportunity to review how that works as well, in case there's administrative regulations that we want to see changing, and understand the reasons why those are changing and how they evolve.
Okay. How many administrative regulations do we have? A bunch?
Lots.
Lots. That's what I thought.
Lucas is sick.
So maybe we could take that under advisement and do chunk at a time, if you will, so that we don't overwhelm a board meeting with a lot of policies review.
I think, I just want clarification. Was Director Mansfield, your intent was just to talk about how they're developed generally and not go through
Correct.
each?
Not a fine-tooth comb going through each one of them.
You scared me.
Yeah, I'm almost a year in, and I think I'm only a third of the way through reading every one of them. So.
And we probably have 100 years worth of them.
Good. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We've done our board discussion. Let's have public comment on this item.
If members of the public would like to address the board on public hearing item number 4, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on public hearing item number 4, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe that we're ready for the vote.
Thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, moving on to another finance, unrestricted net position, information item.
Good morning, President and members of the board. My name is Madison Franklin. I'm the interim finance and accounting manager, and I'm here today to present an information item on the unrestricted net position. Previous board discussion. On August 25th, 2025, the board received and filed the 2024 annual audit, restated 2023 audit, and 2024 report on agreed upon procedures related to the appropriations limit. At that meeting, the board requested staff return with additional information on how the net position is calculated, including details on the negative unrestricted portion. Today, we will be covering the net position calculation methodologies, statewide statistics for net position, historical net position versus unrestricted net position, factors that contribute to a negative unrestricted net position, staff recommendations for increasing our unrestricted net position, and steps for strengthening and reporting on net position. To calculate net position, you add assets and deferred outflows, then minus liabilities and deferred inflows. The pie chart on the left of the screen shows assets and deferred outflows, and the pie chart on the right shows liabilities and deferred inflows. As you can see from the asset chart on the left, capital assets totaled $874 million, which is the district's largest asset. Restricted cash and investments are $94.9 million, which is primarily unspent debt proceeds, FCC revenue, and investments that haven't reached maturity. We also have $26.1 million in receivables, which includes revenues that were earned but are expected to be received in a future year. This includes property tax, interest receivable for investments, and accounts receivable for our sales and services. Deferred outflows are cash held for debt service, OPEB, and pension that will be paid in a future year. Unrestricted cash and cash equivalents total $18.2 million, which represent our available water rate and wastewater rate cash balances. Lastly, our inventory and prepaids are assets that have been purchased but not yet used. On the liability side, on the right, the largest liability is long-term debt at $460 million, which includes the pension bond since it is a bond and not a payment to CalPERS. In Note 4 of the ACFR, it lists all debt liabilities separately for transparency. The remaining liabilities on the chart represent 15% of our total liabilities and include accounts payable and other current liabilities, non-current OPEB and pension liabilities, and deferred inflows. The current net position totals $502.1 million. This is a positive overall net position. Unrestricted net position equals total net position from the prior slide of $502.1 million, minus net investments in capital assets, minus other restricted net position. Looking at the slide, you can see some of the financial transaction types within the net investment in capital assets, other restricted, and unrestricted net position. The unrestricted net position is negative because the district's long-term obligations exceed the portion of resources that are currently available without any legal or board-imposed restrictions. This is not a sign of financial weakness, as these long-term obligations are typically repaid over several decades using future revenue sources that have not yet been collected. During our analysis, we reviewed the financials from the local government financial reporting system completed by the California State Controller's Office for 250 special districts in California. 12% of the agencies have a negative unrestricted net position. 8% have a negative overall net position. Just as a reminder, when reviewing financials, the financial statements should be reviewed in their entirety to determine financial health. As you can see by the blue line depicted on the graph, the district's negative unrestricted net position started in 2016 at negative $14 million and has grown to negative $71.8 million in 2024. From 2020 to 2021, we did have an increase of about $54.2 million to the unrestricted net position. This was primarily due to a shift from using rate revenue to fund capital improvement programs to instead using bond funding from the 2020A certificates of participation and other restricted revenue sources, specifically facility capacity charges. When capital improvements are funded with restricted revenue sources rather than unrestricted sources, unrestricted cash balances are able to grow.
So that's really our pay-go projects then, pay as we go for the capital improvements rather than bond funding?
Yes, so in that year for PAYGO, we used the bond funding and restricted sources instead of unrestricted water rates and wastewater rates, and then those cash balances were able to grow.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. The subsequent decline from 2021 through 2024 reflects the increased use of unrestricted balances to fund CIP projects. Keep in mind, when we use bonds to fund projects, we are also increasing our liabilities by taking on new debt. Over the life of the debt, those payments are funded by unrestricted cash. In 2014 and 2017, new governmental accounting standards were implemented that changed the way agencies report liabilities for pension and other post-employment benefits known as OPEB. These standards required agencies to recognize the net pension and OPEB liabilities directly on their financial statements, increasing transparency and improving consistency in financial reporting. Prior to these standards, the liabilities were only disclosed in the notes to the financial statements and therefore had no impact on the district's unrestricted net position total. However, pension and OPEB continues to grow even with the issuance of the pension bond that paid off the outstanding liability in 2022. Since then, pension liability has grown to $9.61 million, OPEB is at $26.7 million, and the district owes $63.96 million for the pension bond, making the district's total pension and OPEB liabilities $99.84 million. These new standards did not significantly affect credit ratings because rating agencies already factored pension and OPEB into their evaluations. In our research, we found that while these standards did not inherently change creditworthiness, it could highlight issues with underfunded liabilities. As the auditor presented on August 25th with the ACFR, a deficit in unrestricted isn't desirable, but it does not mean that the district is in financial stress. To avoid placing an excessive burden on the district's operating budget, the district has strategically used debt financing to invest in capital infrastructure. Currently, revenues are outpacing operating expenditures and debt financing by $27 million annually. This net operating income is directed toward funding our capital projects. While a portion of these capital investments have been debt financed, the use of water and wastewater rates to fund capital infrastructure projects has directly reduced the district's unrestricted net position. This slide shows the same chart as earlier, but includes dashed red lines for the years the GASB reporting requirements were implemented into the district's financials. The orange line represents what the unrestricted net position would have been from 2010 through 2016 if both GASB 68 and GASB 75 reporting were included in the financial statements. Next, I will go into further detail on staff recommendations to improve the unrestricted net position. An effective way to ensure unrestricted net position increases while continuing to invest in capital infrastructure is to adopt the proposed rate adjustments and have discussions on long-term rate strategies so that we maintain rates at a level efficient to provide services. Establishing reserves will help to improve cash, which increases unrestricted net position. Staff will be updating the budget policy in the near future that will include strategies on how to deposit into reserves. The district could also see an improvement by closing or placing projects into service more timely so that depreciation can be recorded on a regular basis. Staff plan to develop a 30-year long-term financial plan. Currently, the board approves a 5-year financial plan as part of the annual budget process. Staff will look for ways to reduce liabilities such as refinancing or consolidating debt. Staff will review fees and charges to identify possible increases to revenue. Next steps. Staff will continue to try to strengthen unrestricted net position through planning, investments, and liability review. And we will continue reporting the progress to unrestricted net position as part of the annual audit presentation. This is an informational update only, and no board action is required.
Okay, thank you, Madison. Any
Yeah.
board questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. I just want to kind of see if my interpretation is correct, and it may not be. So that's why I need your help.
Yes.
So what is the purpose of calculating our net position, whether negative or positive? What's the benefit of this number crunching?
It really tells us the financial position of the district. I'm at a loss for words right now. I can bring it back at a later date.
Well, let me ask if my interpretation is correct, because
Yeah.
in essence, if we look at all of our assets, all of our liabilities and such, if you were to, because I own a business, if you were to liquidate,
Yes.
and do you have enough assets to pay off your liabilities?
Yes.
So that's how I'm interpreting this.
Yes, that would be correct.
So it's an interesting calculation, but because EID is never going to liquidate, I don't know particularly, I mean, if it was way out of skew, then you're like, wow, you're spending way too much money, and you're not maintaining your assets and stuff. So I question the usefulness of it, and I'd be glad for you guys to bring that back. When we calculate our assets, they're depreciated assets, if I'm understanding it correctly. We're looking at the depreciated value.
Yes.
So again, thinking like from a business perspective, my business has assets that we've depreciated.
Yes.
Now, they actually have, on the books, they have no value,
Yes.
but they actually do have value, because if we were to go sell them, or had to replace them, there'd be either we'd make money or have to spend more money.
Yes.
So the depreciated value is not necessarily a reflection of true value.
Yes.
So again, makes me question the exercise of this whole calculating net position, positive or negative. And then in reading through the information here, well, the recommendations are fairly general. And I know there's not a lot specifically that can be done. No problem with the recommendations, but again, they're fairly general, that we should be doing anyhow. But you mentioned in the report that the OPEB, the pension obligations,
Yes.
kind of flipped us from what may have been a positive net position to a negative.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, that I think is probably useful information for us to know, and I think we're all very aware of it. So I'm just thinking out loud and just sharing with you my thoughts, and just wondering about it. So I'll turn it over to my fellow board members.
Thank you. Other board questions or comments? Director Anzini?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of I appreciate this coming forward. It kind of reflects what were previous discussion in public forum, but it's really important to realize as a public agency, and how do I say this? We provide a service for a community. We're not a closed business. And so in many ways, it's like school districts providing a service to their community, educating our future citizens. Here, we're providing clean, safe water. And we can't do it without a budget, and we can't do it without employees that require payments and pensions. So there's a public service that's available here. You cannot compare it as a business in some ways. A lot of people think otherwise, but when you're running a public agency, there's a phenomenon there that is a public service to all. So that's just my comment, and I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
Other board comments? Questions? Okay. Absolutely.
So something I want to indicate is I understood your explanation of that net position and its value. A lot of the way we report, we're legally required to report in that way. So we're using common terminology as we reflect those things. And I think it gives an overall understanding of where does the district sit. are we flush with money or are we not flush with, and when I say money, cash money, and gives us an indication of what we need to do as we work to move forward. Obviously, reserves was one of the indicators on there that we needed to build up. And the reserves allow us to weather storms that come our way. Things like the Caldo fire, right? That we had to deal with the consequences of it, and it took a lot of money to be able to repair and recover. Money that eventually comes back through insurance or we hope through FEMA at some point, but it's not always a guarantee. And so having the money available to do that is critical to the district's resiliency. But those are things we have to work towards because right now we do not have that in place. And what does it take? So it takes detailed planning when we talk about each year's budget with staff to try to control our expenses as much as we can. Now, it's a balancing act because there are some costs we can't control. Construction costs, for example, they're pretty high for most things, and they just seem to be going up. And so it's trying to look at everything that we could possibly control to try to ensure that as we move forward, we build those up. And unfortunately, it also means that long-term financial plan is going to include additional rate adjustments. I don't know how much right now. We need to engage in another cost of service analysis. But when you look out, as you try to build the district up and what we can do, all of those things have to come together to improve that financial position. So that's sort of the high level. That's what staff's working on, ensuring we're mindful of as we go through each year, working with the board and trying to engage in that long-range financial planning to give the board and the public perspective on what that future beyond these near-term rate adjustments look like. And so there's a lot, but the net position and the unrestricted net position is just giving us a glimpse in what we need to do. So it gives us those measures that help us say, okay, we're not in the best position. We're not in a terrible position because there are people that are in a way worse financial situation than we are, but we need to work on it and improve it. So there's less of this sort of uncertainty, and maybe we have a better unrestricted net position, and our overall net position improves substantially. But it's those same assets that you mentioned that depreciate, but continue to give us service at the highest level that they were valued at. They're not gone, but they will take rehabilitation and replacement, which is an additional cost. So it's trying to, do our best to get through it, but making sure we're always following the legal requirements as we report those numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah, may I?
Certainly.
Yeah, just kind of, while it's on my top of my head, is you mentioned the cost of service study, and I know we just went through one, but because of a lot of the changes that we're going through in our finance department and our upper management, I just put this out there that we typically, well, not typically actually, because for a while the ID went not doing cost of service studies, then they would go 10, 11 years before doing another one. We've tried to get where we at least review it around the 5-year mark, but we may want to consider doing a new one, even though there's costs involved in that. But when we get things updated and cleaned up, and that might be a couple years from now. But yeah, I would just say that might be something for us all to
Funny
think.
you should mention that.
We just had a conversation this morning. The plan is to engage in a cost of service analysis next year
Okay.
to gear us up for beyond 2027, which is the last rate adjustment that was recommended through the prior cost of service analysis. And it will be a full engagement in understanding cost of service, where we're at, and then what it needs to be for that period beyond the 2027. So starting it next year will allow us sufficient time to fully engage and evaluate everything related to cost of service. So whatever indications we come up with on future rate adjustments, They're going to be based in looking at the entirety of the services that the district provides. So that's the plan right now.
Thank you. Okay, I guess, Madison, my comment would be the fact that there's 12% of the agencies have a negative position doesn't give me a lot of comfort. That just says we're no worse than those guys. But I'd rather be better.
Yes.
Okay. Any other board comment? Is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the instructions on page 2. Our camera's still not working, so we're going to show the board and have Mr. again, but if you don't mind, just saying your name for the record again.
Okay, my name is Mike Gillane from El Dorado Hills. I noticed in one of the items I applaud, there's a 30-year plan. That's very ambitious. The world changes a lot over 30 years. I don't hesitate to say I probably won't be around in the latter years of that plan.
Neither
So a
will we.
nearer-term horizon is something I think that should be considered. I know that the capital improvement plan, my understanding is it's required to at least look at a 5-year horizon. And I noted in one of the responses to the civil grand jury report where it recommended maybe a 10-year horizon would be more useful. It might help get us out of some of the maybe less foreseen items that really require some significant rate increases this time. And I know the cost of service analysis also looked at a 5-year horizon. So the point I'd like to make, it might be useful, and I believe you may have been alluding to this, I just want to be more specific. Maybe open up that horizon 10 years or so and really put the amount of rigor into that and for the capital improvement plan, because the observation was that that 5-year horizon allows for a lot of surprises that could show up and surprise the public. Thank you.
Is there any other? Yes.
So yes, you are correct. Now, 5 years, you can have better estimates for that 5-year period. When you go out further, estimation's a little more challenging. However, yes, when I talk about a long-range financial plan, I'm talking about the beyond and trying to provide as much information as we can with the caveat that it is very highly estimated, and those estimates can change as you get closer to that time horizon. But absolutely, that's what we're working on. We're engaging in a lot of projects, CIP projects, where we're doing assessments of our infrastructure to develop what that long-term plan will look like. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll comment that if we came up with a new project today, I bet we couldn't break ground on it with all of the environmental requirements, regulatory requirements, engineering reviews that we need. I bet it would be almost 5 years before we could turn a shovel. Okay, any other public comment on this item?
If there are any additional members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 5, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. It does not appear there are any additional members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, thank you, Madison. Moving on to action item number 6, adoption of a resolution for an emergency expenditure on our floating cover on Res 1.
Before we start, the following 3 action items all contain Doug Veerkamp General Engineering as a potential contractor, so I will be recusing myself for the same reasons described earlier in the meeting from items 6, 7, and 8.
Thank you.
And President Dwyer, if I may just, you're going to witness Director Mansfield leave the room for this item, so you might be wondering, why is he leaving the room now and not earlier? And the reason is because under the Political Reform Act, which is one of the statutes that addresses conflicts of interest, that statute requires a board member to, if there is a conflict of interest or an indirect conflict of interest, as the case may be, to specifically record in the minutes the basis for the conflict, which he has done by reading his prior statement, and then to leave the room for the discussions. There is, however, an exception for when that item is placed on the consent calendar, which is why Director Mansfield did not stand up and leave the room earlier, but will do so now. I just wanted to make that clarification in case anyone was thinking, well, wait a minute, what's going on?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's proceed.
I do have a question, just because it's El Dorado County, and there's a lot of interconnectedness between families and businesses and sort of stuff. Most of the times, I mean, I personally, and I may be wrong legally, but personally don't view him, Chuck, having a conflict in this case. I think it's like the the Kevin Bacon thing, the 6 connections to whatever. But, this is like 2 or 3 connections removed. But it takes a voice out of the room again, we use VERCAP contracting pretty regularly, amongst others. And so I just have concerns about it and wonder if we're not maybe overdoing it.
I appreciate that response, Director Day, and personally, I couldn't agree with you more. Unfortunately, the legislature has seen fit to enact extremely stringent requirements on public figures in relation to conflicts of interest, particularly when those conflicts arise in the context of contract awards. Decisions and deliberations that may affect one's financial interests, those are important, and there are rules about conflicts of interest that are at play, and they are at play today. Those are the ones that are identified under the Political Reform Act and the basis for which Director Mansfield is required to leave the room today. But under Government Code Section 1090, that provision explicitly prohibits an agency from contracting with anyone in which a director has a financial interest. And the consequences for violating that statute are severe. They include criminal violations. So if you're implying that my advice is conservative, you are right, it is. because I take very seriously the charge to ensure that the district is fully compliant with all of the conflicts of interest laws, but in particular, those that relate to award of contracts, because the violations are so severe. Now, as I indicated before, this is not a direct conflict of interest. As you pointed out, there are multiple degrees of separation involved here. And so Director Mansfield does not have a direct conflict of interest, which, if he did, would preclude the district from entering contracts, irrespective of whether he recused himself. That's not the case here. This is an indirect conflict as a result of, as you characterized it, multiple degrees of separation, but in which there is a commonality. And that commonality is ownership in the 2 enterprises at issue here, one being Doug Veerkamp General Engineering and the other being Matt Veerkamp Vineyards. Separate and distinct, but under common, or at least partially common ownership. And one could therefore argue that Director Mansfield might receive or might have an incentive to make a decision that would benefit the one company if he felt like it would benefit the other, right? And that's the situation that statutory provision, Section 1090, was enacted to prevent, to make sure that public officials have complete fidelity toward the agencies with which they serve and not towards any financial interests. So totally agree with what you're saying. Just want to make sure that we're fully protective of the district and that everything is on the up and up.
Yeah, I agree that we will miss Director Mansfield's intelligence and comments on these items, but it's probably best to err on the side of caution. And the 4 of us will just have to pick up the load. Okay, proceed.
Until it's a 2-2 vote.
Okay, good morning, Board. My name is Daniel Goldman, Senior Civil Engineer here with the district. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the Reservoir 1 Floating Cover Emergency Replacement Project. This includes a request for an emergency declaration, 2 contract ratifications, as well as contract award and project funding requests. So previous board action on September 22nd, the board authorized $25,000 for capitalized labor. That was associated with the design phase of the floating cover replacement, which we will talk about in more detail in following slides. So summary of the issue here, Reservoir 1 has a floating cover and liner that have exceeded their useful life. We currently have an active leak in the floating cover that cannot be repaired. We have concerns with potential rainwater contamination with that compromised floating cover as we move into the wet season. And we are proposing a resolution to declare an emergency to complete this project. In addition, General Manager Vandiar authorized 2 emergency contracts on September 26th following consultation with President Dwyer. So staff is requesting the following actions today. First, adopt a resolution declaring an emergency for the project. Second is ratification of those 2 emergency contracts. Third is approval to award 3 construction contracts to complete the project, as well as approval of additional project funding for capitalized labor and project contingency. So some background on the asset itself. Reservoir 1 is a 2.8 million gallon hypalon lined and covered drinking water reservoir, so one of our 7 floating cover reservoirs in the drinking water system. This one is located up in Pollock Pines at the Res 1 water treatment plant, and the cover has been in service since 1989, so well exceeded its 20 to 30 year expected life. Some operational details associated with Res 1. This is a dual.
Daniel, just a quick question. I'm not sure if you know the answer.
Sure.
Maybe John does. Was the replacement of this cover one of the projects in our capital improvement plan that we had deferred?
Yes, is the short answer. There was a separate effort ongoing to look at putting tanks in this location.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's among the 70-some million plus dollars worth of capital projects that we said we can't afford to do them now, so we'll push them off into the future.
Correct.
Thank you.
So as I was mentioning, the operational details associated with this reservoir. This is a kind of a dual purpose reservoir in our drinking water system. It serves as the contact basin for Reservoir 1 water treatment plant when that plant is operational, which is during the summer months when demand is highest. During the winter, this acts as a distribution reservoir, just providing elevation head and storage capacity to meet demand in the Pollock Pines area. Note that with the current configuration of our distribution system, this reservoir cannot be taken offline without modification to other parts of the system, which we'll talk about shortly. So a little bit of background on how this project was initiated. Deficiencies were observed in the floating cover during a routine inspection, and we brought in Aquatech, who is a certified repair contractor that comes in and patches our floating covers routinely. They made a determination that this cover was not repairable. That was the first time we had encountered that determination working with them. So we immediately initiated the floating cover replacement project. Also, when the deficiencies were noted, we contacted the Division of Drinking Water immediately following that inspection and initiated daily bacteriological sampling to ensure that the quality of the water within the reservoir was not compromised. A sampling plan was developed and has been submitted to DDW associated with this reservoir, and DDW coordination is ongoing and will continue to be for quite some time. So just to orient yourselves with these facilities, this is an aerial view of the Reservoir 1 area. On the top left of the picture, you can see Reservoir 1 water treatment plant called out. Then if you move down across Gilmore Road, that's Reservoir 1. You can see the brown floating cover there, kind of blends in with the soil color. And then moving right, just for reference, we have Sportsman's Pump Station adjacent to Pony Express Trail, and then Highway 50 on the far right side of the photo. So zooming in on Reservoir 1 itself, just a little bit of a view of the floating cover in its current condition. These photos are very recent. They were taken within the last few weeks. On the left, we have the overview of the floating cover, and then a couple of close-ups pointed out on the right. The top right, that is the overflow box where water leaves the reservoir at a certain elevation. You can see the various colors of patches that have been applied to that area over the years. And the bottom right is zoomed in on the rainwater sump, which I'll explain on the next slide or two. And you can see, again, there's some darker colors, some lighter colors that don't match that overall tan color. Those are all repairs that have been made to this floating cover over the past 10 plus years. So as I mentioned, just going to give a quick explanation of the rainwater collection system that exists on these floating covers, just for everyone's knowledge. I think it may be useful as we move through the presentation. So this is actually a recent photo during the last rain event of Reservoir 1. What happens is rainwater accumulates on the cover. There are areas that are depressed with weighted sand tubes, as the figure on the left shows. Rainwater flows and collects in those low points. Then a sump pump or rainwater pump takes that and evacuates it from the cover. Because we do currently have deficiencies in the cover, there's also treated water in those rainwater troughs right now. It's exiting the cover, making its way into those troughs, and our pumps are removing that. So we'll go to the next slide. Next slide, excuse me. So this is the basis for the emergency declaration. We have a floating cover in the drinking water system that is actively leaking. We have rainwater contamination threats, threatens the quality of the water within that reservoir. Again, we're performing daily bacteriological testing to confirm that we don't have any indicator organisms that would indicate we have a problem. And we're reliant on that sump pump system that we had on the last slide to evacuate that rainwater and avoid an excess of it building up where we would get enough head pressure to cause us a problem. And again, reservoir contamination, it could result in a widespread boil notice throughout the Pollock Pines service area. So a bit of a diagram here, but it's as simplified as we could make it to explain the project scope here. But to summarize the project scope in 2 sentences, first, it would be implementation of a bypass system so that the reservoir could be drained and worked on. Second would be replacing the floating cover and the liner itself. So I'll walk through this very quickly, a high-level overview of what needs to be modified and done. Ultimately, the water during the winter months is coming from the Reservoir A treatment plant, pumped out of Reservoir 2, up through Moose Hall Reservoir and Moose Hall Pump Station, when it then enters the Sportsman's Res 1 Pollock Pines distribution area. In order to take Reservoir 1 offline, we have to isolate that reservoir, as indicated by the red X's surrounding that Res 1. We also have to replace that storage with temporary storage, which is the red cylinder you see there, the Res 1 temporary storage. And there's a pipeline that needs to connect to that temporary storage as well. Additionally, we have modifications at Moose Hall and Sportsman's pump stations to increase our control of the distribution system in this area, specifically the introduction of variable frequency drives and some additional instrumentation for pump control, level control. And then the final piece of the puzzle here is you see the Sportsman's PRS, or pressure reducing station. That's a modification within Sportsman's pump station to allow for water to gravity flow from the Pollock Pines Reservoir to the Cedar Grove service area in an emergency situation where we didn't have power at the Moose Hall pump station. So a quick reminder here on Board Policy 3060. This is the policy that provides that in an emergency, the general manager can authorize contracts necessary after first informing the president of the board. So relying on that authority, General Manager Vandiar approved 2 contracts on September 26th. Those were Rain for Rent, which is just over $300,000 for bypass equipment rental. So this is largely variable frequency drives and drinking water approved or NSF approved tanks to implement a temporary storage solution. So that's the rental cost through March of next year. Yeah.
How big will that temporary tank be in comparison to the existing storage?
Very small. So Res 1 is 2.8 million gallons. We'll have about 125,000 of temporary storage.
Yeah.
The second contract to Doug Bierkamp General Engineering for just under $200,000. That was for the yard piping that I pointed out on the diagram slide to connect those temporary tanks to our existing distribution system. So what has been completed to date? Planning on the construction for the bypass. We completed an analysis of a bypass plan on September 23rd with the support of Carollo engineers to guide us as far as what was feasible and what was required to keep everybody in service with water during this period. as well as the contract to Rain for Rent, which I mentioned for the temporary storage tank and variable frequency drives. Those had a bit of a lead time, so we got that contract issued. As I mentioned, Doug Veerkamp is out installing the connection pipeline, which is a bit of a timely exercise as well, so we got that moving, and established communication with the Division of Drinking Water. Looking at the floating cover and liner portion of the project, we have completed a 50% design with Carollo Engineers as well. That was completed at the end of September. And we have selected the cover and liner material that we would like to use. There's a couple options out there. So we've made that selection or recommendation with Carollo's support. And we've also procured the construction services proposals that will be needed to move forward.
How long will the reservoir, for lack of a better name, be offline?
Yeah. Our goal is that we'll only be offline for 2 to 3 months. We'll talk about schedule here in a couple of slides, and I can kind of allude to some of the challenges with that. So remaining scope of work, what's left? Again, the bypass implementation is in progress, but it's not complete. So we have temporary storage tanks that need to be staged. We're expecting to receive those at the end of October. The connection pipeline with Veerkamp needs to be finished. That is targeted for October 24th, which we'll talk about shortly with schedule. Installation of the variable frequency drives, which we'll be taking delivery on this week, as well as the completion of programming modifications to allow us to put those variable frequency drives in service and get the control of those pump stations that we need. On the floating cover, a couple more there, sorry, no, it's okay. On the floating cover side of things, we are intending to complete the 100% design this month with Carollo Engineers, which will start the material procurement process, and there's some lead time associated with that. Then we would move into construction, first with demolition and disposal of the existing liner and cover, replacement in kind, and again, this has to be completed during the Res 1 water treatment plant outage, which lasts from approximately beginning of October till mid to late March, depending on weather and demand, because this can only be done when the reservoir is acting as a distribution reservoir. It cannot be done when the reservoir is being used for contact time from the water treatment plant. So here's a high-level overview of what's going on out at Res 1 right now. Just for reference, you have Res 1 is labeled there. That's where the liner will be replaced in kind, the liner and cover. Just above that, you have a 110 by 50-foot area where we are intending to stage our temporary tanks. And then you can follow the dashed blue line from there down to the right. That's about 220 linear feet of 24-inch pipe that Veerkamp is currently putting in to connect our temporary storage system to that existing part of our distribution system, which is shown in solid blue there. Thankfully, we did have a valve and a T that were installed there for a previous project, but otherwise, this is what we're working on out there right now. So as I mentioned, a little bit on schedule here, we have some target milestones. So completion of the pipeline connection and the tank staging, we have 10/24, although the tanks may be staged the following week, given the weather delay that we're seeing right now. We have VFD installation by the end of this month. As I mentioned, we're taking delivery on those this week, and there's some wiring that needs to be done and programming associated with that. Programming modifications right around November 7th is our target at this time so that we can start testing things around the 10th of November. And of course, all of this will be very fluid, but these are our current targets. And then as far as floating cover and liner replacement goes, as I mentioned, 100% design by the end of this month. We are targeting January 2nd for construction mobilization. There's approximately 8 weeks of lead time to get the liner and cover material prefabricated once we get to a place in the design where we can do that. And then we have about 2.5 months in here for the construction window. If this was a perfect world and we were doing this in sunny weather, this would be 4 to 5 weeks of work. However, we're working in Pollock Pines at 3,900 feet. We don't know what the weather's going to throw at us. So we've got a bit of float in that schedule there, but we may need that entire 2.5 months there. Okay, now we have a contracting and funding summary, so bear with me. I'll walk through each of these lines one by one through the cost component, the associated cost, and then the background on the request type. So we had Rain for Rent for $316,000, as we mentioned previously. This is a contract ratification request. This is one of the 2 contracts that General Manager Vandiar authorized in September. Veerkamp for the pipeline construction for $197,000, same situation from the September 26th authorization. EC Applications, they will be the general contractor for the floating cover and liner replacement that came in at just over $1 million. This is a contract award through a single source contracting request. They had the material that we recommend we install here. So there's various material types. They are the California certified installer for that material. So that was our recommendation here. Note that we also got budgetary estimates from a competitor, and it was right around $1 million as well. So we feel pretty good about that number, although single source will allow us to stay on the schedule that we need to here, rather than going out to a competitive public bid. Next item is ICM Group for Construction Management Services. This is another single source contract award request for $173,000. ICM has a proven track record with the district to provide exceptional construction management services. In addition to that, they have recent project experience with a neighboring utility for construction management services on a floating cover and liner replacement, and those staff members are available during our window. So we're recommending that we proceed with ICM. We then have $86,000 for construction engineering services as a project funding request. This will ultimately be Carollo Engineers, the design engineer, bringing them on board for the construction process. And then the last few items here, we have $30,000 in project funding request for material procurement. This is for various valves, fittings, instrumentation, piping, small things that we need to purchase that add up over time that our mechanics and electricians in-house will be installing at the pump stations in various locations throughout the distribution system. $100,000 in capitalized labor and $190,000 in project contingency project funding requests. We recognize that's a healthy project contingency. There are a lot of unknowns with the bypass. Although we have worked with Carollo and we feel we have a sound plan, there's always unknowns that could come up during something like this. In addition, we're entering the contracting phase with EC Applications, the general contractor, at a 50% design phase roughly, rather than a 100% design. So there's just quite a bit of uncertainty as what may be identified moving forward before we do mobilize for construction.
How much of for instance, the 24-inch bypass piping, is that going to be temporary or is it going to be permanent?
No, it'll be left in place. So if we ever do need to bypass Reservoir 1 again, all of these preparations will remain in place.
Okay, good.
Well, no, go ahead.
So we're creating redundancy while we're doing this, which
We are.
is the important part. Okay.
Yes.
Speaking of redundancy, then, when the intertie is completed, will we be able to use this to redirect the water from Slide Park or Treatment Plant A?
Yeah. Yeah, so to speak to that a little bit. So the Sly Park intertie is going to land near Sportsman's Pump Station, so it is wrapped into all this. However, we would still need a temporary storage tank type system to allow us to move the water around the system like we're going to do here. So it would make it easier, but the infrastructure we're putting in here would still be useful.
Okay, thanks.
One of my questions.
Sure. Everybody gets a question.
Continue.
No, so total funding request, 2.1 million, and then we have the the option slide. So we'll wrap up here. So option 1, adopt a resolution declaring an emergency, ratify the general manager's contract awards in the not to exceed amounts of $300,903.16 to Rain for Rent for equipment rental, and $180,000 to Doug Bierkamp General Engineering Incorporated for construction, and award contracts in the not to exceed amounts of $1,012,320 to EC Applications for construction, and $173,380 to Infraera Construction Management Group Incorporated for construction management and inspection services, and authorize project funding of $86,326 for construction engineering services, $30,000 for equipment purchases, $100,000 for capitalized labor, and $190,000 for contingency, for a total funding request of $2,106,109.16 for the Reservoir 1 floating cover emergency replacement project. And our recommendation is, of course, option 1.
Move 1.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, good.
Just a comment before we vote. I think it's really important that through the through the dialogue that we've had this morning, that, you know, this was part of our our capital improvements program. And it's an emergency. And when an emergency happens, that's $2.1 million that we had not configured. But again, we have a long list of priority ones. I believe this was a priority one before, correct? I was going to make you talk anyway, John.
Right. So, John Money, Director of Engineering. So, a couple clarifications. So, on our CIP rating, this was not a priority one. Priority one defaults to safety, regulatory, and projects that are already in construction. So, basically, what we are obligated to do during the current contracting period. This was a priority two. This project has gone through several iterations. So, although it was included in our long-term planning and CIP, what we would like to have done at this site was separate this reservoir into two separate reservoir or tanks. So this reservoir currently functions as both the chlorine contact basin for the treated water out of the plant and storage locally for the distribution system. Excuse me. That's part of the reason, again, we need this emergency tie-in so that we can bypass this reservoir. Right now, we cannot isolate this reservoir from our system. So when the plant goes down, it serves as that storage component year-round. And so that's, you know, think of it like when you see the, like on a newer house, you'll see a little storage tank above your hot water heater. That's to give you a little bit of that shock absorber as water fluctuates through your house. This is what that serves throughout our distribution system out there. It gives us that buffer as people turn on and off water throughout our system, you know, up to a commercial size. So that's what that additional storage is doing, is it's allowing us a buffer and with the VFDs. Also at a very low, you know, basically the lowest our system's going to operate during the winter months. Ideally, we would have placed a separate water storage, preferably concrete tank, at this location for just those storage needs, and a separate concrete tank for the long-term chlorine contact times. This gets us by, and kind of alluding to Pat's question about it takes us 5 years to do a project. This is so we can get projects done faster, especially when our options are very limited. So this replaces and makes this, you know, it's safe to drink. It gives us options for the future. However, long term, likely this reservoir needs to be replaced. So it might shift our priorities as we continue to address our other floating covers, our other reservoirs. However, we would have liked to have seen this $2 million go to a permanent solution rather than a quasi-interim solution at this facility.
Yeah, John, as I recall, we were going to look at all of our tanks, and including these, our storage, and we were wanting to get away from the floating covers. And this, I mean, you kind of answered my question, because it sounds like we still will want to look at changing things there, but this just now maybe gets extended out and we work on other things first.
Correct. And again, you'll see, you know, we've got other ongoing projects. So the El Dorado Hills water treatment plant replacement. I mean, so this facility and the Res 1 facility and their El Dorado Hills water treatment plants, those are both in about equal states of their life cycles. And so we've chosen to move forward right now with the replacement of the El Dorado Hills plant. Outside of the 5-year CIP, this whole facility probably needs to be redone as well. When these water treatment plants were originally designed, you know, they were in the 70s and 80s kind of level of design. They weren't very robust, so they don't add for additional water quality legislation that has come in. Again, we had mentioned on a previous board item adding for treatment options for algae and ozone or not ozone, UV, so that we have other treatment methodologies. Neither one of these plants readily lend themselves to those. So eventually, again, this plant will move through a more advanced design, and have at that time, that's likely, instead of addressing those storage facilities now, we'll likely address them when we rebuild this plant.
I think the thing that bothers me is we're going to spend $2 million to patch it together for another few years, where we could take that 2 million, add another million or so, and make a permanent solution in a concrete tanks, as you mentioned. But we're lead time away from that in terms of engineering and putting the project together and getting the approvals. And so I guess it's a short-term solution, but not ideal.
Correct. And let me, so just one more little explanation on that. So while this was on our current CIP, our hope was, what we were doing is we were pursuing a brick grant for this facility and our Pollock Pines. Right, and so, but that was a year ago. So again, as funding and other changes impact our planning processes, the brick is no longer available. And of course, as all things, as we got through the preliminary design, those estimates also sharply increased. And so although this was on, the replacement of this was on our current CIP, the funding was not in this 5-year window.
Thank you. Any other board questions, comments?
Sure. So this goes back to the issue of aging infrastructure, and it is the number one challenge to this organization, as it is to most other public organizations.
With infrastructure.
And, you know, and it harkens back to the presentation that Ms. Franklin gave earlier today on our overall finances, and the fact that we didn't raise the rates a little bit a long time ago adds to the predicament we're in right now. And I'd reached out to staff, many of the questions that were asked here about long-term replacement, and, you know, this was not necessarily our preferable approach. I remember being up at Res 1 last year, and I thought if I looked at that hypalon cover too sharply, it would break. It just looked like it was so fragile, and all the patches, you knew that, you know, its lifetime was extremely limited. Just some, and again, I keep going back to that Fram oil filter ad, right? It's a pay me now or pay me later, and we're in a pay me later type situation, which means it's just going to cost us more. Just two technical questions. The soils, where those temporary tanks are going, what's the status, and how are we going to do the dechlor on our discharge?
Yeah, so as far as the soil and the storage area, we have a compacted base that we're putting down in that area for those tanks, and they are 20,000 gallon individual tanks. So they're like a frac tank style, if you're familiar with like a Baker tank.
Right.
So we don't have any concerns there. We have a nice flat area, and we're gonna have some compacted base rock. Go ahead.
And then it looked like we're gonna have to do some dechlorination of our treated water. What's the process? It's sulfur dioxide, or?
As far as when the pipeline is put into service?
I just saw that we were having treated water was coming onto the hypalon thing, and
Oh, you're talking about active operations now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a dechlorination diffuser currently in place on the discharge of the rainwater pumps.
okay. Okay, thank you. And again, this is unfortunate, but not to be unexpected. And we're just, you know, it's long-term, and the challenges facing this district are significant.
Any other board comments?
Yes, one more. Thank the courts for allowing me not to have to jury duty, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to leave the room.
Okay. Are there any public comments on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 6, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer doesn't appear. Any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 6, option 1, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Day. And I just wanted to remind folks that Director Mansfield is recusing himself from this item. I believe we are now ready for the vote.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving to item number 7.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Austin Ram. I'm an associate engineer here at the district, and today I will be presenting on the Braden Court Pressure Reducing Station number 1 replacement and transmission valve upgrade project, specifically the award of construction contract and funding request. Before we move forward, I would like to note that these projects were designed and bid together to gain efficiencies in construction cost and contracting, as well as district staff labor. Previous board actions. On October 15th, 2024, the board adopted the 2025 to 2029 CIP, which included both projects subject to funding availability. Some background on our first project, the Braden Court Pressure Reducing Station number 1. So the district operates approximately 250 pressure reducing stations in the water distribution system. Braden Court Pressure Reducing Station number 1 is at the end of its useful life. In addition, it has been leaking since 2021. You can see a photo on the right of the interior of the pressure reducing station. This station operates under a high pressure drop, roughly 140 pounds per square inch. And because of that, the current valves and plumbing are encased in concrete to restrict potential movement. And this, because of this concrete encasement, a full replacement is required to maintain service reliability. Some further pictures of the pressure reducing station, this time on the outside. One thing I would like to point out here is kind of the slope or the grade around the pressure reducing station. Which kind of gives a little bit of inclination at the operating head and pressure at the station. Moving on to the transmission valve upgrades project. So the district maintains transmission pipelines to convey drinking waters to its customers. The isolation valves and air release valves are required for operation to isolate sections of pipe for repair, as well as to release trapped air that can potentially damage pipe and other various equipment. This project specifically is focused around 2 specific areas: Gold Hill Row intertie, in where a isolation valve failed in 2019, and this area specifically is going to include a full rebuild of the intertie section. Moving on to the second area. This one is on the El Dorado Main at number 1 along Carson Road. This section needs an isolation valve and air release valve for improved operational flexibility. Specifically, this will decrease the number of customers impacted by shutdowns for repairs or other various reasons. And this location was identified by district staff based on previous project and repair knowledge. So moving in here to a project map. So Gold Hill intertie, you can see we have our kind of GIS map here of our water system. 2 important things I want to point out are the fact that this is an intertie between El Dorado Main number 1 and El Dorado Main number 2. This provides some operational flexibility in the area as far as moving water between the 2 mains. Up on the right there, you can see a photo of the current valve configuration. You can sort of see a photo of it. This is the most recent photo of it being unearthed. And on the bottom right there is the diagram for the entire rebuild of the section. And you can see the darker outlined sections are what's going to be new, essentially. Moving on here to the Carson Road proposed valve location. So the proposed valve is going to be going right in the center there. And this will essentially allow us to isolate upstream and downstream of that. Furthermore, currently, if there is any repairs needed in that area, The shutdown will include all the way up to Swansboro, which you can see those two transmission lines or distribution lines on the top left in the blue along North Canyon Road and Fruit Ridge Road. Those go to customers in the area as well as customers all the way up to Swansboro, which is relatively far away. So that valve right there would allow isolation between those two areas. So project scope as a summary, replace one pressure reducing station and abandon the existing pressure reducing station in place. Rebuild the Gold Hill intertie and add isolation air release valves. Install an isolation and air release valve section along Carson Road. Some considerations for that are disinfection of new piping equipment, service shutdowns during the installation of these new sections, as well as potential weather impacts. Moving on to the construction bid, this was first advertised in August of 2025. We had a mandatory pre-bid meeting on August 21st, and bids were due on September 4th. We received 5 bids, with Doug Veerkamp General Engineering, Inc. coming in with the low bid at $529,101 for the combined project construction. And I would like to note that the engineer's estimate for this, for these combined projects was $690,000 for construction. Moving on here to the request for proposals for construction inspection. This was an on-call list that advertised on in August of 2025. Proposals were due on the 5th of September, and ICM Group Incorporated came in with the low bid at $84,000, and they have a proven track record with the district and have relevant experience and appropriate level of staffing. Moving on to the construction engineering services, Verdondis Incorporated is the engineer of record for this design package. They submitted a proposal of $25,000 for construction engineering services and will provide submittal reviews. They'll respond to requests for information from contractor or other parties, as well as preparation of record drawings. Environmental review here, the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under Class 1 maintenance and repair of existing facilities and Class 2 replacement of existing facilities. Summary of project funding here, construction contract to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering, Inc. for $529,101. Construction inspection services to ICM for $84,000. Construction engineering services to Verdondis for $25,000. Capitalized labor of $52,000 and a 10% project contingency of $69,010 for a total of $759,111. Moving on to the options here. Option 1, award a contract to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering Incorporated in the not to exceed amount of $529,101 for construction and authorize project funding of $84,000 for construction inspection, $25,000 for construction engineering services, $52,000 for capitalized labor, and $69,010 in contingency for a total funding request of $759,111 for the Bradencourt Pressure Reducing Station number 1 replacement and transmission valve upgrade projects. And the recommendation is option number 1.
Thank you, Austin. Board questions or comments? Director Anzini?
Before we have comments, I think we should make an action.
Nope.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I approve, that we approve option 1.
Thank you very much for keeping us on track.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Director Day. Now, any comments?
This item, and at the last meeting, we had the Greenstone, and I was just taken aback by the cost for these pressure reducing stations, knowing that we had 250 of them. And I'm going, whoa. And so I reached out to staff saying, I was uncomfortable, but, the feedback from staff is that these are unusual pressure reducing systems that require considerable, much more amount of work that elevates their costs, and there are other activities such as the intertie in these bids, and that further upgrades to existing pressure reducing stations will be by orders of magnitude less. And so I appreciate the feedback from staff. Again, I was uncomfortable by what appeared to be, high costs for small areas. So I appreciate the feedback and to put things in perspective.
Thank you. I think this points out one of the reasons as we talk about rates, the uniqueness of our distribution going from 4,000 feet elevation down to 400 feet and the number of pressure reducing stations that are required as opposed to Folsom that's relatively flat. So, it's one of the consideration. Unfortunately, these kind of, I'll call them system maintenance to keep the system healthy, also compete with our CIP funds to make improvements. So it's a delicate balance of what do we have to do now, what can we defer, what's the emergency, and putting in the isolation valves helps us maintain the system to the majority of customers while we can isolate a piece so we have the least impact on people in the distribution. That's just my observation. Thank you, Austin. Well done.
Just a comment. I mean, we are a gravity-fed water system. I mean, face it. So people in El Dorado Hills do not realize, or many do not comprehend where the water comes from. However, pressure reduced, I myself have kind of like jimmied my own do-it-yourself irrigation system in my house. And I do realize when the pressure is less, my pipes don't break. And I think it's really understanding that when the water's going down, it's got to be reduced for every segment to get those, 20 miles that we have to go down from the pipeline. So reducing our pipe stress keeps our pipes a little older. And those who are weak are the ones that need to be replaced. So reducing that amount does not stop the water from flowing.
I feel the need to defend El Dorado Hills. So I encounter a lot of knowledgeable people in my day-to-day activities that know sometimes more than me about engineering and the water system. And so I've got to stand up for the folks down in El Dorado Hills. And you guys should too, because you represent some of them. I do. All right. Thank you.
Any other board comment? Is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the board, if members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 7, please refer to the instructions in today's agenda. President Dwyer, does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 7. Option 1 moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Day. And just another kind reminder that Director Mansfield has recused himself from this item. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome aboard. Okay, I guess we'll move on to action item number 8, brought to us courtesy of PG&E.
And Patrick Wilson.
Okay, Patrick.
Well said, well said. Good morning, Board. Patrick Wilson, Senior Civil Engineer, here today, to present on the Highway 49 at 273 Pleasant Valley Road sewer replacement project. This is award of construction contract and a funding request. So no previous board actions. So the summary of the issues. So staff identified approximately a 20-foot segment of gravity sewer interceptor from the original 1988 Highway 49 sewer interceptor project that was damaged. The pipeline, as the board may recall, is 24-inch spiralite, a spiralite 40 pipe. At this particular location, the depth is 10 feet, and I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. And for construction, the flows will need to be bypassed in order to maintain sewer service to all surrounding customers. Next slide. So just as a background, the district has adopted a sewer system management plan, and within that, an operations and maintenance plan where approximately every 10 years or so, we go around and we visit all of our, and physically inspect all of our gravity sewer lines via TV cameras. Next slide. And of those, within the collection system itself, of that 650 miles of pipe, approximately 63% of that is gravity mains that we're going around and doing that inspection. Next slide. So for the spiralite portion of that gravity system, staff has completed 100% of the inspection on that, a little over 11,000 linear feet of pipe. We did locate, we did find a ground rod that was inserted through the pipeline, which we'll get to a photo of that in a moment. We also found a deformed segment within that same location as that ground rod. And we also found some other minor defects throughout that system, but none of which need to be repaired at this time in any short order outside of those first two items. So 273 Pleasant Valley Road, so it's adjacent there on Highway 49 in the background. You can see the road itself, and then the power pole that's vertically there. And then the red line is the location of where our 24-inch sewer line is. Our sewer line being 10 feet, that pole was installed approximately 9 feet down in depth, and the ground rod obviously deeper than that. As you can see on the photo on the left, it's inserted into the pipeline itself. Where the camera is sitting at this location, it's very hard to see, but just beyond that and on the same segment of pipe where that power pole was installed, it actually deformed the our spiralite pipe as well. So within that same 20-foot segment that we're replacing with this project, we're removing not only the ground rod itself, the damage that it incurred, but also that deformation from where the pipe was installed. Next slide. So working with Pacific Gas and Electric Coordination, so we've communicated the initial findings from the inspection. So we initially, coordinated how we were going to move forward with the project itself, at what level. So we coordinated the removal of the ground rod, which PG&E had come out and completed. And then we ultimately just were in conversation about who would replace the damaged section of pipeline. Ultimately, they deferred to the district to complete that repair. So we did conduct a field meeting to review the pole conflict as well, because PG&E, there was a discussion about whether that pole could be braced to allow for the replacement of construction. So PG&E requested the district to pothole that pipeline because the district was affirming that the pipe was actually underneath that power pole. After we were able to confirm that the power pole was directly over the sewer main, we have since coordinated with PG&E to relocate that power pole, not only to allow for construction, but to no longer be over our pipeline directly. So for construction bid, we solicited to 3 contractors that were able to quickly mobilize construction resources to complete this work. Again, very specialized, working with Spiralite 40 pipe. It's not a standard PVC, ductile iron, concrete pressure pipe that we're used to working with. The goal is to get this project done in advance of winter flows. Any increase there obviously will increase the cost of bypass pumping in order to manage those sewer flows. So we held a mandatory pre-bid on September 18th, and bids were due on September 30th. Doug Veerkamp General Engineering was the low. We also invited Tyker Construction. However, given their workload at this time of year, they were unable to provide a bid for this work. Next slide. So environmental review, the project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, as is Class 2 replacement or reconstruction of existing facilities on the same site with the same purpose and capacity. So for project funding, we're asking for a construction contract award to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering, as well as on-call construction inspection services of $20,000, on-call material testing for backfill and compaction of $5,000, capitalized labor for project management of $10,000, with a 10% contingency, a total funding of $178,010. This project was not included in the 2025 to 2029 CIP, and we are planning to submit a claim to PG&E to recover costs following the completion of this project. So board option is option 1 is to award a contract to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering in the not to exceed amount of $127,010 for construction and authorized project funding of $20,000 for construction inspection services, $5,000 for material testing services, $10,000 for capitalized labor, and $16,000 in contingency for a total funding request of $178,010 for the 24-inch Highway 49 273 Pleasant Valley Road sewer replacement project, project number 25042.01. And recommendation is option 1.
Move one. Driving down Pleasant Valley Road, saw a whole bunch of trucks. Didn't know what it was about. Got my board packet, got the explanation. But obviously, the question that I posed to staff earlier is cost recovery. So I'll just throw that out and ask for an update.
We will endeavor to keep you updated.
How many feet of replacement is this for 178,000?
A little over 20 feet. Those sticks aren't exactly 20 feet, so like
Wow.
21 and a half, something goofy like that. So
So when is this going to be completed, or,
hopefully next week, if we can get the contract in place, that's the goal.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Is there any public comment on this item?
If members of the public would like to address the board on action item number 8, please refer to the instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it appears there are no members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 8, option 1, moved by Director Penn and seconded by Director Day. And one last reminder that Director Mansfield has recused himself from this item. I believe we are ready for the vote.
Okay, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move to closed session. Council, do you have any estimate?
President Dwyer, thanks very much. The board will meet in closed session as per the 2 agendized items on today's agenda under closed session items A and B. I anticipate the board's consideration of these 2 items will require at least 20 minutes.
Okay.
And before we go out, I just want to compliment staff. The last board agenda and this board agenda has the PowerPoints separated out, which is a brilliant idea. It took us a long time to get there, I guess, because I can't tell you how many times you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, trying to find it. So thank you, that was awesome.
That was something that Director Penn and Director Anzini asked that I do.
Thank you, guys.
And I would just like to make a compliment also, that the most recent articles that are going into the news and also into our social media, very professional, well done, very informative, and I look forward to them every day or once a week. So, great job.
Thank you very much. We'll
And
adjourn to.
just one other comment. So the members of the public who are attending, it took me a while to really grasp the complexity of this organization, the challenges that we're faced. So I hope by attending, you get a better understanding of this is an amazing system, and it really does provide safe and reliable water to this community under very tough circumstances. So thank you for attending.
More dog and ponies.
The
Thank you.
board will not report back prior to 11:15. However, it could be after.
Goodbye.
Okay, we'll reconvene out of closed session at 11:33. Anything to report, Council?
Yes, President Dwyer, I have 2 items to report out of closed session. Regarding closed session item A, on a motion by Director Dwyer, seconded by Director Day, the board voted 4-0 with Director Penn abstaining from the vote to ratify my action to refer the district's legal defense of the identified claim to the law firm of Colantuno, Highsmith, and Watley. Regarding closed session, item B, on a motion by Director Dwyer, seconded by Director Anzini, the board unanimously voted to continue to retain the law firm Barkovitz, Cronick, and Shanahan to represent the district in the appeal of the identified litigation. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Okay, any assignments to report?
We have one review of assignment from Director Mansfield, and he just wanted to have an information item on how the district's administrative regulations are developed.
Thank you. I think next time we have the capital improvement plan workshop, so come prepared. All right, and I don't think I have anything else. Any other directors, anything? Okay, meeting adjourned.
11:34.